Unfortunately, folks, something that we seriously have to be talking about these days is the boogeyman of stagflation. We're going to have this conversation with the one and only Taylor from Life Goal Investments. We'll talk a little bit about what stagflation is, but more importantly, we'll talk about how the hell do we get out of it, because the Fed is in a conundrum. Taylor, how you doing, buddy?
Man, this whole dual mandate of stable prices and full employment becomes tough when they both start to go the wrong direction, which is the definition of stagflation. But man, you're starting to see the real weakness in the labor market start to show through. We've got a 3-month rolling average now of 30,000 or 29,000 jobs added. For context, in a normal economy, when we're not in a recession, it's typically 150 to 250,000 jobs added. Post-COVID, it was like 1 million, like it was nuts. And now we're at the brink of negative job growth. So that's
we actually had a negative print for June, right? Yeah,
we did in the revisions. Yeah, when they went back, they actually said, okay, it was outright negative in the month of June. And now this week, we're about to get the year end of March, I think through March, the full year revisions for what we've calculated. And last year was 818,000 less jobs than what was initially reported. Boy, that would be ugly if we got that, wouldn't it? So
let's talk about that a little. Yeah, I want to talk about that revision because that actually comes out tomorrow on September 9th. We're recording this September 8th. JP Morgan, I'm sure you saw this. JP Morgan's calling for an adjustment of 950,000 negative, so more than the 818. And I'm actually calling for 7 figures. I think it'll be over 1 million adjustment. And if people don't realize, this adjustment will be important because, to your credit, it was the 818 negative that caused the Fed to go 50 last September. And again, last September, that 50 was a surprise to the market. The market was pricing in a quarter, and the Fed gave 50. And oh, by the way, guess what's happening today? The Fed, or the market, is expecting a quarter, and I'm calling for 50. And I think tomorrow, and if it's a 7-figure adjustment, we're getting 50. I don't know how we couldn't. What do you think?
Tend to agree. And I've been in the camp of rates should be cut much earlier on this year. And that was something that I have not been in that camp from a persistent basis for the past 3 years or whatever it is. I have not been ahead of the Fed saying bring down rates, but I did get there much earlier on this year. And the whole thesis behind it was, and this gets us to the second part of stagflation, is the deflation part, the inflation. I don't think that you get meaningful, persistent, ongoing inflation based on tariffs. I think you get more demand destruction of the goods that have the tariffs applied to them. And so, therefore, I think the Fed is late. And this is the first time I've been saying this over the past couple of years.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, again, I think you're absolutely 100% correct. I think the media is still missing the inflation warning, and it's not goods. It's not tariffs. Yes, stuff will roll through, but you guys are looking in the wrong area. I would ask you to go back and look at last month's PPI number, not CPI. PPI. Most people don't even look at it because it's wholesale. But buried inside PPI was a real big warning about services inflation. That's the thing that will bring on stagflation. If we get services inflation in an economy that's 65, 66% services based, watch out. That's where I'm looking. So the PPI number, I think, comes out on Wednesday this week. I'll be combing through that to see if services inflation was a blip or a problem.
I agree. And that's where we saw the massive problem looking backwards too. So services, because it's such a large constituent of what we actually do in this country that generates money for all the consumers, is sell them things that are not goods. They're services, they're restaurants, they're vacations, they're flights, they're this, they're that. And that is where the bulk of people's paychecks go. And so when that starts to move in the wrong direction, that becomes a little bit scarier of a proposition than something that is a goods that is 15% of what we intake in our country. Yeah. It's just law of numbers there.
Yeah. And again, stagflation is such a problem. You hinted at the beginning because the Fed tools are, let's call them muted. They basically can handle either high inflation or low growth. They can't handle both at the same time. And, I often go back to the 1970s, right? I was a child. I was a kid. I wasn't an adult, but I remember the 70s just sucking, right? It was just, there were gas lines and there was just, it was just yuck. It was a horrible economy. And I could see that as a child. And I certainly don't want to go back there.
Yeah, effectively, the Fed has to choose one or the other. They have to choose which is the bigger boogeyman. Is it inflation or is it jobs? And it is funny to think about the percentage of people affected by one, but the actual feeling of the percentage that's much lower affected by a job loss. So what I'm getting at there is, inflation affects 100% of the economy, 100% of the constituents within the economy, you and I and everyone else. So it is much more broad reaching. But when you think about the actual impact of, okay, Michael, you no longer have a job, you no longer have an income, that is chopping someone's legs out from under them. And it's not just the no money coming in the door. It's also the mental nature of, okay, you're not needed in this economy and what that does. And we're seeing labor force participation tick downward now. And that's not a pretty sign either. People are becoming disenchanted with trying to get a new job. And so it's a scary thought on that side. So I guess I'll flip it to you. I know we've debated this in the past. What do you think is the bigger focal point by the Fed at this point? Is it jobs or is it inflation?
Oh, I think no. I called this after the Jackson Hole meeting. I think Powell was as clear as he's ever going to be, and again, he's never clear because he always wants deniability.
His job to be unclear,
the ability
right?
to. Yeah, but parsing his words, I think he clearly said the Fed is jobs over inflation, and I brought that to my channel for quite a while, and that's why I was out early calling a 50 basis point cut. In September. I called this right after that first revisions where we lost 250,000 jobs. So that was 2 reports ago. I'm like, they're going 50 in September because the job market is an elevator. It's not stairs, right? When it breaks fast. And, I think we're going to get the number tomorrow over 1 million and the Fed's going to be fucked. They're so far behind. And again, I want to be clear. I'm the guy who was saying no cuts all year. Right. So let me explain that. So again, I was in this camp. I felt really good about it until 2 months ago when that horrible revision came in, right? Where they changed 2 months from like 150 to like 22 or whatever it was.
Yep.
I'm like, uh-oh. Right. So I don't flip flop on my channel. I hold to the bitter end. But when you get new information and it changes your entire scenario, I changed my mind and I owned the mistake, right? I came out and said, hey, I'm wrong. This is, I'm clearly changing my opinion. Let me explain it. And again, I went hard, right? I was the only guy on the island until like this weekend. Now, after Friday's number, I think it's a 12% chance of a 50, right? We had Standard Chartered come out this week and say they're going 50. All right. There's a couple other people talking about 50. I don't know how they can't. July was a mistake. July was a mistake not to cut. And they need to cut in September. And if they don't, this thing can get bad fast, Taylor. So I think the Fed is all in on jobs.
Yeah, it's funny. They need to time their meetings better, right? Like if you knew July's number,
no shit.
Then the Fed, what are they doing? This isn't like, hey, we're cool, we're gonna hold to this schedule. Like, no, set the schedule accordingly. Get the most pertinent information, not 2 days after you set interest rates. Get it before. Postpone the meeting. Don't schedule the meeting then. It's up to you guys. It's just stupid. And then all of a sudden you have a month, 2 months that you now have to wait when interest rates should be lower and should be stimulating to the economy, at least to some extent. Not saying it would, change the world, but it's helping. And it's stupid not to do that.
Yeah. So let's play this out. Let's say the Fed, again, people are calling for 6 cuts by the end of 2026, right? 3 in 25, 3 in 26. That's going to take the Fed rate sub 3%. I guess when I look at this, it's like, is that enough? Is that going to save us? And the other question is, what happens to inflation? Any thoughts?
I just don't see inflation as being a persistent issue. We have so many deflationary trends, the big or disinflationary trends. The big boogeyman when it comes to inflation, and it's what caused it in 2022 for the most part, is just the supply chain got disrupted for oil. And when oil starts to recalibrate higher out of some exogenous event, that causes broader inflation. And without that, I don't see it taking place. And I don't see a big disruption in oil taking place. We just saw Iran and in the Middle East, broadly speaking, have the issue with Israel and the back and forth there. And you would think that would cause disruption in oil. It didn't. The reality is the U.S. right now can go down directly drilling into rock, drill sideways in rock 4 miles, and strip natural gas out of or oil out of the rock. And so with just our ability to tap into resources with technology that we didn't have in the past, I don't see inflation being an issue because I don't see oil prices meaningfully increasing. Yeah. So I kind of dissuade that and say, I just don't see it. And then I think that the consumer on the low end of the market is strapped right now. And so with that, I think they probably can't continue to pay higher prices for things. So at some point they stop spending. And we haven't actually seen it yet. There's been a lot of conversation on, oh, the consumer's strapped, the consumer's pessimistic, but they've continued to spend, whether it be credits or whether it be actual cash on hand. They've continued to spend. At some point, they're going to tap out, and that will stop some of the inflationary pressures.
No, I agree with that. Again, I think at the end of the day, the big question at hand, the Fed's going to choose labor over inflation. I do think we have a lot of disinflation. I am worried about services inflation. As I said earlier, it's not the good side of this. It's the services side that could get wild, right? You see labor supply fall. You get competition for labor again. That could become a problem. I don't see it, but it could become a problem, right? It's kind of on the radar to watch. But yeah, I think when the history book is written and, the econ student of 2030 is looking at the 2020s, I think they're going to talk about stagflation, below trend growth, higher inflation, at least for a couple of years. I think that's a real possibility.
If you remember, Jerome Powell doesn't see either part of it. I think he's starting to see both parts.
The stag or the inflation.
Yeah. We'll see how
that's right. That's going to go back to bite him. Taylor, where can people find you?
Yeah, find us at Life Goal Investments. We're on both Instagram and on TikTok at Life Goal Investments.
Thank you, buddy. Appreciate you.